Hey there. If you're new to being a nursing educator, think of this as your personal review session to get you started on the right foot. Today, we're going to put on our hard hats and think like architects. But, instead of buildings, we're constructing some really powerful, really effective learning experiences. We're going to go from the initial blueprints all the way to the finished product. Okay, let's get into it.
So this is it. This is the big question, right? It's at the heart of everything we do. It's all about getting past just covering the material and instead designing a lesson where the learning is intentional, it's measurable, and honestly, it's built to last. So how do we pull that off? Well, you always start with the foundation. So here's the first principle you've got to master. Every single solid lesson starts with a detailed blueprint. And in our world, that blueprint is our set of learning outcomes. This is the part where we decide exactly what we're building before we even think about picking up a tool. And this right here perfectly explains the problem with a weak blueprint. See, a vague goal like improve medication safety, that's a nice thought, but it's not a plan. It's kind of like telling a builder, hey, just make me a nice house. Without any specifics, your teaching is just going to wander all over the place, and you'll have no real way of knowing if your students actually learned a thing. Okay, let's really break this down, because this is a concept you are going to use every single day. Just look at the difference here. The vague objective, that's a wish. The strong objective, that's a contract. It has three key parts you've got to include. First, the conditions. Here, it's the simulated patient scenario. Second, the behavior. What will the learner actually do? They'll identify precautions. And third, the criteria. How well do they have to do it? With 100% accuracy. Now that is a blueprint we can actually build from. All right, so once that blueprint is locked in, it's time to open up the toolbox. This is where we start looking at all our different instructional strategies and picking the exact right one for the job we just defined with our outcome. And that's really the whole point, isn't it? You wouldn't use a sledgehammer to hang a picture frame. It's the same idea here. We can't just default to a lecture for absolutely everything. As educators, we have to recognize that different kinds of learning demand totally different tools, different strategies, and different ways of checking our work. Think of this table as your go-to guide for matching your strategies to your outcomes. So, if you're teaching declarative knowledge, the what, a multiple choice quiz could be perfect. But if you're teaching a motor skill, like how to insert a catheter, you need to actually see them do it. That's a return demonstration. And for something like affective learning, like developing professional values, well, a reflective journal gives you insights you never, ever get from a simple test. The point is, the assessment has to match the outcome. So we've got our blueprint and our tools. Now, let's talk about a really critical distinction every educator has to get: the inspection, or what we call assessment. See, it's not just one single event at the end. We have to be checking our work during the construction process and then again when it's all finished. And this slide makes that difference crystal clear. Think of formative assessment as the friendly site supervisor who stops by while you're still building. It's low stakes, it happens during learning, and its whole purpose is to give feedback for learning. Summative assessment, well, that's the final inspection. It happens at the end to measure what was achieved. It's an evaluation of learning. Any strong lesson design uses both. It has to. Okay, every good project has rules you just can't break, a building code, if you will. This is what makes sure the final structure is strong, safe, and that it actually works for everyone who's going to use it. For us, this is all about making sure our assessments are fair and accessible. And the absolute cornerstone of that building code is validity. It's a simple question, but it's incredibly profound. Is your assessment actually measuring what you say it's measuring? So if your goal is about communication skills, does your assessment measure communication? A multiple choice test on communication theories? Nope, it's not valid. But a simulated patient interaction? Now that would be a valid way to measure it. I absolutely love this quote because it just gets right to the point. Look, it can be so tempting to pick an assessment just because it's easy to grade. We've all been there. But if it isn't valid, the results are basically meaningless. So the bottom line is, we have to prioritize measuring what actually matters, not what's disconvenient. And another huge part of our building code is applying the principles of inclusive design. And this just means we're actively thinking about who our learners are. So as you design your assessments, you got to ask yourself these questions. Are my examples culturally relevant to my students? Is the language I'm using maybe an unnecessary barrier? Is the technology I'm asking them to use accessible to everybody? And I want to be so clear on this point, because it is a really common misconception. Inclusive assessment is not about lowering your standards. It's about raising the bar on fairness. It's all about making sure that you're measuring your students' knowledge, not their ability to get past some unnecessary hurdles that you might have accidentally put in their way. Okay, so let's bring our whole review session together now. We've talked about the blueprint, the toolbox, the inspections, and the building code. Now, let's talk about the single most important principle that ties all of it together, and that principle is alignment. I want you to think of this as the golden thread that runs through everything you build. It's a really simple chain of logic that you should use to double-check all of your work. Does your outcome actually align with your goal? Do your teaching strategies help students achieve that outcome? And this is the big one, does your assessment directly measure that outcome? When this chain is strong and unbroken, learning is effective, it's efficient, and it feels purposeful to the student.
So here it is, the final takeaway from our review. As you go out and you start designing your own lessons, I want you to ask yourself this one question. Could a colleague look at my module and clearly see that golden thread of alignment? If the answer is yes, then you haven't just covered the material. You've built a truly powerful and effective learning experience from the ground up.